This is Frontier Opening Bell. Thank you for joining us on the show today. I'm Temple Ashad. With us on the program this morning, we've got Ayodeji Ebo, Senior Economist and Head of Research and Strategy at Greenwich Merchant Bank in Nigeria. Thank you for joining us on the show. Bosun Omofaye, Executive Editor at Frontier Africa Reports. Thank you for joining us as well on the program.
Good morning. Thank you.
Let's hit the ground running with the markets. How did they close yesterday? We begin with Nigeria, which was positive by some 33 basis points on Monday. Ivory Coast, the BRVM stock exchange, which had a slow start to the year, seemed to have gained some traction, rising by some 0.21% yesterday to open the week positively. Egypt, the Egyptian stock exchange, was also up 0.17%. Kenya was positive by more than 1% yesterday as well. And South Africa, Johannesburg Stock Exchange jumped by 1.5%. All the markets settled in green. It was a positive start to the markets. Opportunity for some investors to actually take some profits much later, perhaps during the week. Well, let's look at the Eastern African headlines, beginning with Kenya, as always. IMF announces some $2.4 billion staff level financing deal with Kenya to earn some 164 billion Kenyan shillings, equivalent of $1.5 billion via e-commerce in 2021. Kenya coffee earnings was up by 94%. Uganda's British American tobacco gross revenue was up by 1%. Profit before tax jumped by 30%. Uganda's value of mobile money transactions was also up by some 28.2% in 2020, and Tanzania's listing of all buildings to increase property tax except that of the religious bodies commences, looking to end around the 28th of this month, basically the month end. Bosun, let me come to you quickly with these headlines across the eastern part of Africa. Make your pick and give us your editorial judgment. Your mic is muted.
I think my comment is around the IMF deal with Kenya now, which is $2.4 billion US, I think, which came in late yesterday afternoon, I guess. And the whole idea is that this, some folks were saying Kenya will go into some rate cut downgrade because of this development, because of the issue with the G20 and DSS. I was looking at that through the news wire this morning, whether this, the deal with the IMF by Kenya makes it fall in the same category as Ethiopia and a few others like Togo, which will get Kenya a rating downgrade. That doesn't look like it's going to happen. So we're still looking at what this really means. 3-year, $2.4 billion US. When you look at the other stories, it doesn't look like Kenya has a couple of issues with its fiscal balance, by the way. But again, when you look at the other stories, you can find that a whole lot of areas in which Kenya was doing well. Yesterday on our TV show, we spoke about Kenya's tea exports, which is the fourth in terms of GDP contribution, by $1 billion US in January. Now you're talking right now about coffee. Okay, sorry, flour, which is horticulture, sorry, I beg your pardon, was $1 billion US. Now we're talking about coffee, which is about $1.5 billion US in exports in January. Look, these guys are just positioning themselves. Their exports is well diversified. Kenya is not exporting one single barrel of oil to the international market. It's not a member of OPEC or non-OPEC, whatever you call it. They are not even looking to do anything with oil now. I think they sort of push it forward to some years down the line in terms of the licensing round with Tullow Oil and the rest of them. So this is Kenya earning 94% on coffee higher. Look at the kind of cold snap in Texas, the whole of southern parts of America. If you have what it takes now, folks will be drinking coffee and tea like no man's business. Nigeria needs to look into areas of this nature. The other story I want to talk on very quickly is Tanzania, listing all buildings in order to make sure that there's property tax. And I think we should follow the same thing in Nigeria. The problem is that if you are listing the big men's buildings, will you be able to still collect the same property tax? That's the issue here of the big men, the middle-sized men, and the rest of us below the ladder within the country. But I think Kenya is a big story. Uganda's story was also quite significant, but I love the Tanzania in order to make sure that, look, it makes the whole property market, real estate, a whole lot of things. Data is king. Data is everything. Temple. Thank you.
Yeah, Bosun, you raised a very valid point. But the point again is that if you bring such an idea to Nigeria, you're going to have a whole lot of disagreement.
Pushback, yes.
Yeah, because the tenement rates that folks pay in Nigeria, they also pay all sorts of construction licenses fee and all of that. Let me bring in Ayodeji on this this conversation. Have you got any comments to make on this?
Yes, I think for us, we know that there's always that when you look at the value chain, the storage or what storage is really critical if we want to grow that space. So most of our cash crops that we should have improved on, beyond the storage, we are not adding value to them. So you just export them as crude in their crude form, and you import the finished goods. So I think that even if we're going to adopt that and we're going to say we want to grow, pick one or two specific crops, we need to work on that value chain of that storage as well as processing. And that is when we can grow our manufacturing sector and create jobs and create employment and add value, which will also reduce the demand of FX on the CBN.
All right, and thank you so much for that comment. In the course of the show, Chima Okadike, consumer goods analyst from Vertiva Capital Management, joined us. Thank you, Chima. Thank you for coming through on the program. Now let's move on to the Western African headlines, where we have the new WTO DG, that's World Trade Organization Director General, highlights women in trade, SMEs, digital economy, and the rest. Nigeria's January inflation and consumer price index data out today. Fidelity Bank raises some 41.21 billion naira 10-year bond program. Maturity date should be 2031 at 8.5%. West African Monetary Union members to issue some $7 billion stimulus bonds in 2021. And you know that Ghana energy sector debt may hit some $12.5 billion by 2023. Mali's Bank of Agriculture's profit after tax jumped by over 108% to 528 million CFA. That's the full year or fiscal year 2020. Let me come to you first, Chimba, with these headlines. You are the only lady we've got in our midst here. We should celebrate the fact that we had a woman joining the world's women leaders yesterday, and that's Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. Talk to us about the significance of these to gender equality.
I think it's a very significant step in terms of gender equality. A lot of people have been very excited, male and female alike. Everybody's just excited to see that we have a Nigerian, an African, and a woman as the DG of the World Trade Organization. And I think general feeling, like I said, is just excitement. We know that she's very capable, having had a lot of experience in her portfolio as the Minister of Finance for Nigeria several years back, and also as a very senior officer at the World Bank. So we're just excited to see what she adds to the WTO, which looks like a very positive prospect. Although she already has a lot on her table in terms of reforming the WTO, in terms of talking about the subsidies for fishery, which has been pending for a while, and in terms of bringing global trade up to par, given the disruptions that have happened with the pandemic and the COVID-19 disruptions. So I think she's very capable, and I think we're going to be able to see some very positive reforms going forward.
Thank you very much. Ayodeji, let me come to you with the inflation story, and if you still like to add to the WTO DG story, it's fine as well. But the inflation reports just coming in now says inflation has now hit some 16.75% for January, all the way from 15.75%. I mean, what does this mean for us in Nigeria?
Okay, thanks. And just to add a bit join my own voice to the WTO story, a big congratulations to Professor Okonjo-Iweala, and we have no doubt that she would make a major difference. And beyond that, it's also deemed that light on Nigeria. We across the world. So despite a lot of the challenges, the insecurity, a lot of negative news, we can still see one positive news across that at least would be that major attraction that people want to um, look into or look into what Nigeria is all about and how we have been able to make this significant, achieve this significant mileage. Now coming to inflation that just released, that was just released about some minutes ago. It's expected that we'll continue that increase. We are projected about 16.58 and came in at 16.47% on a year-on-year basis. And we had also expected that the month-on-month would moderate because when you look at the dynamics in December, there's always that demand. If you check on a month-on-month basis, you always see that jump from between November and December. And when it comes to January, like we all spend the money in December and January, people just try to survive, which is always classified as the longest month in the year. If you dissect the figure, you'll discover that food inflation has continued to be the major culprit within that space. Came in at 20.5% from about 19.5% in December. Yes, the border has been opened, but when you look at, there's the imported inflation element to food, and also for the border, it's still very early, that lag effect. Yes, on a month-on-month basis, the reduction, we trace that to the demand. Demand typically reduced in January. So that impacted on food prices. And the psychological effect of the border has been opened. You see prices dropping, standing for some products. We believe that as we progress into the year, we may begin to see that impact of the border reopening. However, the food inflation elements will still continue to remain high. We know most businesses purchase dollars from the parallel market, close to 500 naira and to $1, which would be impacting on the food inflation. And when you also look at core inflation, that also increased, which we can also trace to the FX challenges. So by and large, there are still major downside risks to inflation. The electricity tariff, yes, it was increased last year, but we are still yet to achieve that cost-reflective tariff. Secondly, for PMS, we can see oil prices. So it's a sweet bitter situation that you see oil prices increasing, currently above $60 per barrel. But we're unclear who is paying the difference. And because there's a template that has been shared earlier last year on the price modulation, but now we're unclear who is paying that. And Morgan Stanley is projecting that it may actually get up to $100 per barrel. Yes, we jump as Nigeria positive for us, but when it comes to, because we are not refining, so that would have a major impact. And if government decides to reintroduce subsidy, it would also still impact on the ability to implement the budget. Revenue is challenged, and the little revenue you're able to get, you can't also be using it as subsidy. So I know in between the deep blue sea and it's really a dilemma for them to decide on what to do. But I feel that is another major downside risk to inflation as we progress this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ayodeji. Chima, with all of the points that Ayodeji has made now, what are the chances that Nigeria is likely to have some stability in its inflation, given the fact that, yes, we have hike in electricity tariff, we have instability in the price of crude or petrol at this point. We understand that landing cost is likely to hit 180 naira per liter now. We also have food inflation at this point in time.
I agree completely with IODG. All the downside risks to inflation continue to remain. Apart from all the things he has even mentioned, one I note is that food inflation will continue to soar. Although we have seen that the AFCFTA has opened up the borders for us for imports. If you look at the inflation reports, the components of the food basket that have continued to pressure food prices remain bread, cereals, and meat. Now we know that rice production in Nigeria is still very stunted. We rely a lot on importation. We also rely a lot on maize importation. And if we look at the bread parts, we need flour and some other ingredients to make bread. And if you look at the recent developments from the AFCFTA proceedings, flour and rice are things that have been put on the excluded list, meaning that they are not going to be the lower tariffs to be able to import those items. So I think we might still be a long way if we look at it just in terms of food inflation alone, not even talking about the impact of core inflation or the impact of the energy reforms on inflation. I think we'll be a long way from seeing stable price levels, because we're still expecting food inflation to continue to top the chart, given the hindering factors in food production in Nigeria.
Thanks a great deal, Chim. Bosun, over to you with some of these other headlines, including the inflation data.
Well, I think so much has been said about the inflation. If you permit me, I'll take a look at some of these other stories around Africa. For example, when you look at the earnings from the Mali's Bank of Africa, this is one Africa that's a very strong footprint across the French-speaking West Africa, all the way to Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt. So this Bank of Africa is listed on the Côte d'Ivoire, the BRVM. This is one bank that is doing very great business within that. Not much of it is known within the English-speaking West Africa down to Central Africa. If you go to Mali, sorry, if you go to Cameroon, Yaoundé, Douala, you'll see the Bank of Africa there. So this is one of the earnings that is coming through from this. Is a profit after tax of 108%. That gives you a whole lot of how this bank is performing within this corridor, and of course lending very greatly. It's a household name within the Francophone West Africa, North and Central Africa, the CEMAC region. They're talking about the UEMOA looking to member states to raise about $7 billion in stimulus funds for this year. Look, this is going to be on everybody's face. Everybody's raising money one way or the other. Either you're doing budgetary support or you're doing stimulus support for COVID-19 and all of that. Kenya is getting this $2.4 billion from the IMF, all because as a part of the budgetary support. The stimulus funding will continue. I think the UEMOA countries will be able to raise this. We saw what Ivory Coast did last year and early this year in terms of the Eurobond and those three papers that were reopened just about a few weeks ago, which was about 850 million US dollars, which was done significantly overbought, is looking really good. So with the backing of France in Europe, you are sure that these UEMOA countries will be able to go through it. Togo is already been in the conversation for the G20 DSSI, and I think they will be able to scale through. Just keep an eye on these French-speaking West African countries, Temple. Don't mark my words. They're making progress. Benin Republic, you'll be surprised how much progress they're making. But because they are smaller countries and all of that, they seem not to be in the news in everybody's face. But you'll be surprised how much progress is being made. $7 billion, I'm sure France, President Macron is standing by with to support them from Europe.
Absolutely. But you know, Bosun, I mean, the news is actually in the strength of their integration. This whole West African Francophone countries are really strong when it comes to
collaboration. You get it. It's integration, yes.
Sure. Let's move on to the Southern African headlines, beginning with KPMG in South Africa. They're looking to end the consulting services to Johannesburg Stock Exchange listed companies. Shoprite liquor sales decreasing by 21% on virus, and of course profit was just 12.5% higher. Deloitte agrees to pay 1.3 billion rands in compensation to Steinhoff claimants. Metals, copper at highest, platinum at 6-year high, and gold begins to retreat. Now, Rand clocked 60 on Sunday, firmer by some 0.5% a day trade Monday, which is at 14.47 per dollar. Bosun, let me come to you quickly with these corporate stories relating to KPMG and, of course, Deloitte. These are stories that really matter when it comes to publicly listed companies and private corporate governance, so to say.
Yes, I know. Thank you, Tempo. I think I'll let Ayodeji speak to the KPMG and maybe the Deloitte issue, because they're professional services audit firm and all of that. And the whole issue between the big three, or the big four as they call them now, I think it's KPMG, Deloitte, and PwC, the big three around the world. Let me quickly speak to the issue around the commodities. Copper is red hot. Look, we had a stellar stock market around the world yesterday. There's a whole lot of optimism around the fact that the vaccine for the virus is getting more distributed. Ngozi spoke about it yesterday vehemently, that the price should be fair, the distribution should be fair across ports. There should be no patenting of it at all. Everybody who can make it and is effective and is tested should be allowed to make it in any corner of the planet. So it shouldn't be a European Western Hemisphere drugs for the rest of the world. I love that part of our conversation and discussion at our briefing yesterday post appointment. But speaking to the metals per se, so the optimism that the global economy will rebound is pushing copper, is pushing silver, is pushing platinum. This morning, platinum was up north of 4% this morning. Aluminum is red hot. Copper is jumping. Silver was about 27, close to $28 an ounce this morning, up by more than 1%. Gold, which is a safe haven when you have a lot of risk off sentiment, you begin to see that gold simmered a little bit this morning or since yesterday, and you see investors looking at where copper, aluminum, and platinum will be going. And that is good news, by the way, because when you see these base metals that go into manufacturing, industrial production in developed economies, the price move up, that tells you that there's a strong optimism that the economy globally is about to turn the corner. And I think the GDP we saw, the numbers we saw from UK last week was a bit positive as well in some way. But if the vaccine comes and the virus footprint is slowing down a little bit right now in terms of infestations and deaths in the Western Hemisphere, I think it's good news for everyone.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, happy anniversary to Rand at 60.
That's interesting. But added to the metals market is the fact that a lot of these commodities have actually hit lower prices at some point. So it was an opportunity for some investors to come in and pick up the low valuations.
Aluminum at $2,000. Aluminum at $2,000. Temple, you are in the money. This went down last year to as low as 700, 800. And it's back at above 2,000.
Yes. I mean, that's something to celebrate, actually. But you and I are not buying.
No, I'm not in there.
A few minutes to the end of the show. Let's have you bear your thoughts on all of these corporate stories, Deloitte and, of course, KPMG. What happens when professional services like these are pulling out of corporate listed companies, on the stock exchange, coupled with the fact that they're under pressure at this point to split accounting services from auditing services?
Yes, I think we all know that for most of these big four, they control the major market, and to avoid let's say an oligopoly situation, there are big controls are being put in place, so you can't be auditing and be providing consulting services. And I'm sure part of the major reason is to ensure that there's to prevent what we call conflict of interest. That's the word. And the pulling out of KPMG from the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, yes, I'm not sure of the reason that's named public, but it will be like an internal decision. Maybe sometimes you see the top four, they can weigh which gives more revenue. So if we go into audit services with this person or advisory, or we do consulting, which one in the long term will give us more revenue? So if you have that option, you may want to shut down one for you to have the opportunity to come on board on the other business angle. So, and you look at for the compensation, agrees 1.3 billion compensation to Steinhoff. So I feel that it's also part of instilling discipline, putting in control. So it will be a learning point for even other companies, because you also know, as uh, for auditors, there's always that caveat that they put is based on information that they give to them, is based on what they know, based on the of their I think there's the I'm trying to recall the word that they use, is what they can see based on what they are open to. They put that caveat. So, but most times they also have that responsibility should also lie with them. That they people rely on based on their audit. People invest based on the positions that they publish. So there should also be a bit of responsibility on their part.
Thanks a great deal, Ayodeji. Let's finalize and wrap up with the Northern African headlines. Bosin, I'll give you a bit of some 60 seconds to help us share your perspectives on these. Egypt Same Shenouda becomes AFC, that's Africa Finance new executive director. Faisal Bank business volume rising some 11% plus. Egypt's gas profit after tax shrunk by some 48.7%. Maghreb Oxygen warning sees some social results declining some 24% in 2020.
You see, the corporate news, I'll stick with the corporate news that are coming left, right, and center. You know, this is the season, by the way, and we still have a whole lot more to get from Nigerian space in terms of the big banks that are yet to report. I know Ayodeji and Chima, even though Chima is in corporate consumer goods, I'm sure everybody has a finger in the banking sector. We can't do without them. So when the big banks are yet to report, we all anticipate. So earnings season across Frontier Africa is continuing. But if you permit me, Tempo, I just want Chima to give us a minute of her thoughts on this exclusive list, which is being reported about some of the food items in Nigeria that are going on, either on or has been reported in the media. Which product is going under what, and what's driving what we know right now from the government side in terms of whether sugar, salt, a few products, flour or rice will go into either exclusive list or whatever.
And it's over to you now, Chimba.
Thank you. So for the exclusive list, we have sugar and flour. We also have rice. Well, I'm not exactly sure which one is exclusive and which one is the other one, but the whole idea is that the lower tariffs that is applicable to the AFCFTA agreements are applicable to these items. So we have sugar, we have flour, we have rice, we have cement as well. As to the reason for why these items have been exempted, it was not very clear in the article I read. It will be very important to see, it will be a huge resource to see why these items have been banned. I can say, for example, sugar, we know that the sector has been sort of protected with the NSMPs, with the NSDCs, National Sugar Master Plan over the last 12 years. They've been trying to grow the sector, grow raw sugar production, and try to limit the importation of sugar, although that is still allowed. So I think it just follows that if we're trying to protect the sector and grow, we should try to make sure that allowing back cheaper unlicensed, cheaper sugar from other countries would then pose a harm to these growth projections. But in terms of flour and in terms of, although flour as well, we are low on production in terms of flour. But as for cement and rice, I do not exactly sure why this has been exempted. We would have to wait for further guidance from the government to know what that is all about. I'd just like to go back to some other news on the West African markets and one news on South African markets. I saw that Shoprite beer sales, liquor sales reduced by about 21%, which I don't think is surprising at all, given the ban that happened in the last year twice. Alcohol sales were banned in that country, one from trying to limit drunken driving and drunken activities, as people were indulging a lot in alcohol, and two, because the country was trying to stave off the effects that alcohol would have. They thought it would exacerbate the pandemic's effect on the country. I don't know the update on that, if they still plan to continue with that line of action. I think that is still set on the table, but then I think it's safe to say that we should continue to expect the earnings for Shoprite in terms of alcohol at least to continue to dwindle. Also, my last story, excuse me please, is in terms of the debt or capital raising by some of these Nigerian banks. We saw that Fidelity has raised about 41 billion naira in the capital market, and I think it is very significant. I think it's the largest corporate raising in so far. I don't know how long, but it's a very significant amount. I think Fidelity Bank is a familiar in that space, and I think it has done well for them to raise at 8.5%, given a time where, although we are starting to see that fixed income rates are kind of inching up, I think going by their subscription levels, they came at a very opportune time, and they were able to see positive reactions from the market. We also saw that EcoBank raised about $300 million in the Eurobond market, and I think this is actually a good time for the banking industry or the banking players, given how they're able to raise funds positively and being received positively from the market.
And a good time as well for yourself, fund management companies, to be able to lock your funds around these companies. Thank you very much, Chima Okadike, consumer goods analyst from Vertiva Capital Management, for all of your analysis on these headlines this morning. I appreciate them. Ayode J. senior economist and head of research and strategy at Greenwich Merchant Bank, thanks a great deal. Bosonomo Faye, executive editor, Frontier Africa Reports, thanks a great deal for all of your perspectives and your editorial judgment as well on the show this morning. This has been Frontier Opening Bell for Tuesday, February the 16th, 2020. I'm Temple Ashadu. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.